Do not listen to this story, and I think this is the scariest one I've gotten so far for spooky scary story time. And honestly, I hate this story. When I read it, the hair on my arms was like standing on end, but I'm gonna share it anyway. Just watch it in the daytime, so save it for later if you need to, but literally don't watch it at night, because I did and it freaked me out. The story was submitted by this guy named Tom, who told me he wanted to tell me about his experience moving with his girlfriend during 2020. Tom is obviously not his real name. He wanted to be anonymous, but he will be reading the comments. So Tom and this girl, Michelle, are dating for like 3 years. They're living in a big city. I don't know which one, he didn't say. They live a really good, comfortable life. Tom works in IT, and his girlfriend, Michelle, is an instructor at a yoga studio, and they both do pretty well. They're both really healthy, really fit. They love being social, going out. No mental health issues at all, right? Tom also said that Michelle made a lot of money on social media. She was sort of an influencer, and she did a lot with different fitness brands, and she would film a lot in her studio. 2020 hits, and Michelle is immediately laid off because the yoga studio closed, but Tom was able to work remotely because he was doing that mostly anyway. Their apartment is really expensive, and their lease is coming up, and they basically decide that they want a quieter life because they don't know how long everything that was going on in 2020 was going to last. So they ended up signing a lease for a place that was about 50 minutes outside the city in more of like a rural area. He said it was still kind of suburban, like there were stores around and places for them to go and get groceries, like not super country, definitely not what they were used to in the city. And when they moved out there, they were really excited because it was a change of scenery for them, and they were saving money to buy a house. So rent was a lot cheaper, and they were both happy with the move. Everything's fine. Tom sets up his office. Michelle has the spare bedroom as her yoga studio where she's going to continue filming content, and things seemed perfect. A couple months after they move, Michelle decides that she wants to get into gardening. She was obviously already really into health and fitness and wellness, but she decided she wanted to be more into sustainability and was starting to like make more videos about sustainability. So she has Tom go in the backyard and basically dig a giant pit where they're going to start a compost pile. And Michelle's out in the yard, and she's like planting some vegetables that she had gotten, and Tom calls her over because his shovel hits this like metal box. So she comes over to look, and they pull out this, he described it as maybe like a 12x6 just metal cash box. And it's all dirty and rusty, but they pull it up, and Michelle opens it, and inside is a Ouija board. And Tom is immediately kind of like put off by this. Like, he doesn't really believe in that stuff, but he also doesn't like it. And Michelle's like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I'm going to make some videos on this. And she takes it out and walks back up onto their patio with it and starts like dusting it off on their patio table. They kind of leave it out there, forget about it. And later that night, Michelle's like, oh, do you want to go play with the Ouija board? And Tom's like, not really. Like, you know, he said that they were really into Tiger King at the time. He just wanted to like watch that and hang out. And she was like more into going outside and playing with the Ouija board. So she's like, well, I'm just going to go play with it if you don't want to. And he's like, okay, whatever. And he just stayed inside and watched TV. The next day they wake up, Tom logs into his computer to start work, and Michelle, he said, was kind of just groggy, which was pretty out of character for her because she's normally pretty bouncy. She was a morning person. She would always wake up at like 6 a.m. with him, but she's just like slinking around the kitchen. And he's like, are you okay? And she's like, I just don't feel well. She's like, I don't think I'm going to make any content today. I think I actually have been like having the urge to paint. I'm going to go to the store and get some painting supplies. And he's like, okay, cool. He's working. She comes home with like a bunch of canvases and some paint. And she basically converts like half of her yoga studio into this painting area. And she spends the rest of the day doing that. The next day, same thing. She just wants to paint. She's not really feeling well, doesn't feel like making content, doesn't feel like doing yoga. This goes on for like a week, and one night he wakes up and she's not in bed. So he gets up to go to the bathroom, and then he notices like she's not in the house. So he sees the patio light is on, and he walks to the back door and he looks out and he sees her sitting at the patio table playing with the Ouija board. And he opens the door and he's like, Michelle, come inside. Like, what are you doing? And she's just like, oh, like I just wanted to see if I would get anything. And he gets this unsettled, anxious feeling in the pit of his stomach, because now he really does not like the Ouija board. The next day she's painting, and he walks in the room and he's like, hey, like, I think we should talk about the Ouija board. I don't think you should have it. Like, I think you should get rid of it. I don't really like the idea of it in our house. And she's like, you're being dramatic. You know, I'm going through something. Like, it's a fun activity for me. I don't have a lot of fun in my life. My job was shut down. And so he just drops it. And he's like, okay, you're right. Like, I'm overreacting. So later he feels kind of bad, and he goes back in her studio, and she's still sitting there in silence painting. And he said on the canvas, it was just like a bunch of triangles that were all overlapping all over. And he basically tells her that he feels like they haven't really had a good like date night, obviously, since 2020 started. He's like, why don't we have a fire in the backyard? We can just like grill some food. Like, it'll just be really fun. And she just tells him flat out no. Like, she just wants to paint. So he goes to bed, and she is still painting that day. So he wakes up in the middle of the night again. She is still not in bed, and he hears her talking. So he goes, okay, well, she's just making a video. So he peeks into her yoga studio, and she's not making a video. She is still painting, but now she is painted off the canvases onto the walls, and it's still the same overlapping triangles on every single surface around her. And he's like, Michelle, what are you doing? And she turns around and looks at him and says, I found the door. And at this point, he realizes like she is not right. Like she's having some kind of mental break. So the next day, they wake up, same thing, she wants to paint. And he calls her mom. And he basically tells her mom that Michelle is going through something and she needs to snap out of it. And he asks her mom if she'll come and stay with them. Her mom has like nothing going on, I guess, because the next day she comes and stays with them. And Michelle seems normal when her mom is there. Like, she basically pulls Tom aside and she's like, I don't know why you called me. Like, obviously I'm happy to spend time with you guys, but she seems normal to me. And Tom's like, she's not normal. Like, I'm telling you, she's not normal. That night, her mom comes and wakes Tom up because Michelle is back outside playing with the Ouija board again. And her mom is super religious, so she does not like the Ouija board idea at all. She's like, you guys need to get rid of it. Like, why did you get her this? And Tom's like, I didn't get her for it. We found it in the yard. The mom's like, oh my God, you found it in the yard? And she's like, we are getting rid of this right now. Like, we are going to burn it. And she makes Tom make her a fire where they burn the Ouija board. And Michelle just maintains, like, you guys are overreacting. Like, this is just like a fun activity. Like, it's not even serious. Doesn't have any strong reaction to them burning the Ouija board aside from just like being annoyed. So it's the next night. Her mom is going to leave the next day. And Tom wakes up in the middle of the night to her mom screaming. And he runs out in the hallway and he sees Michelle sitting in the dark, facing the wall, just at the end of the hallway, like facing away from them, sitting cross-legged, staring at the wall. And her mom is yelling, like, what are you doing? Like, get up. And Michelle does not react. Like, it's like she can't hear them. She's just repeating, they're going to come in, they're going to come in, they're going to come in. So Tom runs over, grabs her, picks her up, and like basically shakes her. She snaps out of it and she's like, what's going on? And they're like, you were literally just talking to the wall. So her mom has had enough. She decides that she's going to bring Michelle home with her. She's like, I need to take her to church. Like, I don't like this. And Tom can't really argue with her. He's sad to see Michelle go, but he thinks it's just temporary and he has to work. So he stays at the house when Michelle and her mom leave. I don't know where they lived, but he said it was like within a day's drive and he could go, and he visited her a few times and she seemed fine. Apparently at her parents' house, she kept doing weird stuff at night to the point where they had her committed. Everybody is attributing this to a psychological break from the stresses of COVID and her being laid off. Tom is beside himself, but is trying to be as supportive as he can. He's in constant contact with her mom. And about 2 weeks after she gets checked into this mental facility, Tom is cleared to visit her. So he packs up, drives out to the mental hospital. She's sitting in this cool toned room in a rocking chair when he gets there, and he walks up to her and he was like, hey, how are you doing? And she just looks at him and says, you brought them with you. Oh my God, that freaked me out so bad when I read that. Oh my God. Keep sending me these stories. Tom said Michelle still is in this facility. She has obviously gained a lot of weight. She does not do yoga anymore. She does not make content. He said she has completely lost her mind and barely recognizes him when he goes to see her. A really good one that someone sent me, and I will be adding it to this.
This is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life, and I wasn't even planning on making a video today, but I feel like I need to get out of my system because I have been welling up with tears and having full body chills from being scared. If you know me in real life, that never happens to me, so I feel like I just need to get out of my system. So this is that story. This happened 4 years ago. I was a freshman in college and I was talking to this boy at the time, and he caught me when I was coming home for the weekend from college, and he asked if he could take me stargazing. I say yes. He picks me up. It's maybe 11, 12 o'clock at night. He drives me to the state park specifically because I had never been before. And specific to note about this state park next to my hometown, it isn't, when I say in the middle of nowhere, I legitimately mean in the middle of nowhere. The closest gas station is like multiple miles away. Nobody lives near there. Yeah, you get the gist. So we get there, he originally parks in front of this watchtower. We're walking up the watchtower. Something to note about me, you're gonna learn about two of my fears today. I am afraid of heights. The tower starts shaking from the small amount of wind, and I immediately am like, hey, I don't like this. We're about halfway up. I don't like this. Let's go down. So he's like, okay, I actually thought you might be scared, so I have an alternate way for us to go look at the stars, but we have to walk through the woods. Usually, and before I get any comments about that, I know, okay? I know. The only reason why I went is because he was like, it's like a minute and a half through the woods. Perfect, a minute and a half, no worries. I shouldn't have listened to him because it was a 10-minute walk, if not more. It is so dark in those effing woods that you cannot even see your hand in front of your face. I'm walking through the woods, I'm doing fine. My other fear is the dark. Okay, I'm a full-grown woman. I am exponentially scared of the dark. Like, unrealistically scared of the dark. We're walking, we hit a fence, and not just any fence, a barbed wire fence. By this time, my eyes are fully adjusted in the dark, and out in the distance, I can see a barn. Right next to the barn, I see a big silo, and if you don't know what a silo is, it's just this big metal structure that holds corn where I'm from. A lot of farmers have them. And I immediately ask him, is this someone's land? He doesn't really answer me, and I'm like, no, seriously, is this someone's land? Because I'm not going to get shot tonight. Because where I'm from, they're not going to ask you on their 5 acres of land what you're doing on their land. They're just going to shoot you because they don't know who you are at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Or I guess what you are. So finally he tells me it's someone's land, and I'm like, I'm not trespassing on someone's land. Like, no thanks. 3 strikes and you're out. I've walked through the woods. I have tried to conquer my fear of heights, and I'm walking in the dark. No. This is no. So finally he's like, okay, fine. Like, we'll go back to the car and I'll drive you home. As we're walking, I don't know what it was. The hair on the back of my neck suddenly stood up. I start to feel like someone is watching me. And all my girlies with anxiety like me, you know what I'm talking about. But this was different. This was different. This was like burning 2 holes in the back of my head because they're staring so hard. And it was so bad that I kept turning around and there was literally no one there. My eyes are fully adjusted at this point. There is no one there that I can see. And I start walking so close to this dude that I'm flat tiring his shoes, which means I'm like stepping on the back of his shoes every couple of steps, and he's getting super mad at me. But eventually I just grab his arm and I say, there is something out here with us. And I made sure to whisper it because at the end of the day, if there is a living human being out there, I don't want them knowing that I feel like something is wrong. And number 2, it was really quiet out there, like deafeningly silent. And he immediately tells me, like, Elena, it's okay, like your anxiety, it's okay. I understand that you're scared of the dark, but everything's gonna be fine. Like, there's no one else out here, there's no other cars, everything's gonna be fine. We take probably 3 steps and start to hear rustling. And immediately, this is when my breath literally is taken away. Like, I'm like, I can't breathe. And again, he's like rubbing my back and he's like, it's okay. Like, there is seriously no one else out here. You're gonna be fine. We're walking for maybe a minute. We have our flashlights out. From our right, a rock doesn't tumble out. It is thrown out into the middle of the path that we're walking. I mean, like, right in front of us. Like, someone threw it. This was a game time decision, right? Right. I left him in the woods. I ran so fast, I left him in the woods. I have never ran faster in my entire life. In all my running girlies, I ran for a minute. Sprinted for a minute. I get to his car and I'm trying the door handles and I immediately am going through all these scenarios. I'm like, what am I gonna do if if there is a person in the woods? So I'm trying the door handles. I'm going to like literally every door and all of them are locked. And all of a sudden I hear him giggling and like jogging out of the forest. And he was like, that rabbit really scared me. A rabbit? And I probably look disgusting at this point, but I legitimately lost my mind on him. I was like, since when do rabbits pick up rocks and throw them at people? Since when has that ever happened? But anyways, we get in the car, we drive off. The whole time I'm asking him, what do you think that was? What do you think that was? Do you think that was a real person? Do you think that was a ghost? What was that? And I don't think he took me very seriously at the time because he was like, whatever. Needless to say, I never talked to him ever again. And now I will elaborate on why it's so scary to me. I don't think that was paranormal by any means. Because when you experience something paranormal, it's almost like an instantaneous thought, right? You're trying to rationalize. You're trying to go through the scenarios in your head on how it is possible that that happened. This was different. I have never felt so fearful in my entire life. And let me ask you this. When you get home late at night, maybe after a night out, or when you get home from work, school, etc., what do you think you're going to see when you turn the light on in your room? Probably some decor, probably your bed, your desk maybe a pet lives there, I don't know. but you anticipate on what you're going to see because you're prepared for what you're going to see. I'm not comparing bedrooms in the woods, but I was not anticipating someone else to be out there because there's no cars out there. There was no way for someone to get out there if they didn't get there before the sun went down, if you catch my drift. And I think there's something, at the end of the day, there is something so deeply frightening about knowing someone was watching you the whole time. And there is something equally as frightening knowing you never saw them. And then you have to think about a plethora of things. Like, why was that person following two teenagers in the woods without making their presence known? How did that person get out into the middle of the woods in the middle of the night? I left a key part of the effing story out. When we got there and we got our little pass, the state trooper or whoever was working there told us that we were the last people going in. So be that as you may, moral of the story, you never know.
Don't watch this video at night when you're trying to go to bed, especially if you sleep alone. You've been warned. The story that was sent to me by somebody who wishes to remain anonymous has got to be the creepiest thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't know if y'all are ready for this one. I know I wasn't. But if you made it this far, you probably love scary stuff as much as I do. Just remember, you asked for this. You stayed. Let's get into it. For the sake of the story, we will call this person Becky. So Becky's lived in her house for 2 years on September 1st. She's heard noises a few times during those years, but she's never experienced anything that really scared her to her core until recently. Earlier this year, her father was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. Her and her dad were extremely close, and sadly, he lost his battle on June 30th. A few months prior to his passing, he was placed on hospice. However, he was still alert and oriented. One day, Becky, her fiance, and her son were all driving to dinner when her son said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." Becky was like, "Okay, what's up?" Becky's fiance looks at her and says, "Just listen to him. He already told me this morning." Her son proceeds to tell her, "Mom, I saw Papaw." Becky was like, "Yeah, son, we go see Papaw every day." He said, "No, Mom, I saw Papaw in our house. I saw him 3 times. One time he was standing in my doorway just looking at me, and the second time he was running by my door and went into your room, and then the third time I only saw his face and he was just peeking in the doorway at me." He then told his mom he wasn't sick Papaw, he was normal Papaw. He went on to tell Becky what her dad was wearing, and he described exactly what her dad's work uniform was. Becky immediately started hysterically crying, and she was like, "Oh my god, I have to call my dad." She called her dad and everything was fine. He felt fine, nothing was wrong. He was more worried about her. Fast forward to now last week, Becky was laying on the couch talking to one of her best friends. It was the middle of the night because she's a night shift worker and her friend goes into work in the middle of the night. She hangs up the phone with her best friend and it was around 3:30 in the morning. A few minutes go by and she sees this dark figure that's like 6-7 foot tall that looks like it's wearing some kind of cloak of some type go from her son's room down the hallway to her room. She was frozen in fear and texted her best friend what she saw. That evening, before going into work again, she decided to tell her fiance what she had seen. He was hesitant to do so because he doesn't really believe in a lot of things. Nonetheless, she tells him and he just stared at her. She's like, "I know you don't believe me." He said, "No, Becky, on Wednesday night while you were sleeping, I saw it twice." He said it was just standing on your side of the bed and just staring at me. He saw it once at 1:30 in the morning and then he went back to sleep and saw it again when he got up to get ready for work at like 4:30 in the morning. And he said that time he blinked and it was gone. He said he didn't tell her because he didn't want to scare her, but also he just didn't think she'd believe him. Towards the end of summer, he got up in the middle of the night one night and Becky felt him get up and then get back into bed, but she felt somebody standing behind her staring at her. She said she was too scared to roll over and look. She could feel it staring at her. Fast forward to this past weekend, her son comes to her again and says, "Mom, I need to tell you something." He proceeds to tell her that while he was using the bathroom a few minutes ago, he felt like somebody was watching him. He said he turned to look and there was a dark figure standing in Becky's bedroom doorway, leaning out looking at him. He said he could see what looked like stringy hair hanging down. Whatever this is, she's terrified that it took on the identity of her dad and that maybe her son has welcomed it into their home. She's looking for help, answers, anything. She needs advice. She's desperate for advice and suggestions on how to get this thing out of her house. She feels like she's tried everything. The only other weird thing that she's noticed is that all of a sudden she's being overran by spiders, but that just might be the time of the year, but it hasn't happened in years past. Can't wait to hear what y'all think about this one in the comments. As always, send me your scary stories.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I live in Oregon, and a friend of mine was having her bachelorette party at a cabin in the woods at the base of a very well-known mountain. I was looking forward to going. A lot of people I care about were going to be on that trip, and I thought it sounded like a really fun weekend just to get away and be in nature. And the first thing that happened when I left my house and I was just on the outskirts of town, I got such a strong feeling to turn around and grab some cleansing tools like sage, Palo Santo, whatever I had on hand. And it was so strong, I turned the car around, went home. My husband's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I just had to use the bathroom and I don't want to use the gas station." Totally fed him a line because I didn't want him to get worried. It was a really pleasant drive up there, a couple of hours. You're at least in the forest for, I'd say, 45 to 50 minutes before you find this house. This house. As soon as I pull up into the garage, I immediately just have this overwhelmingly heavy feeling that I really can't explain. Two other people had arrived. They were there taking care of a lot of the organizational details, and I walked in and my two friends are standing in the kitchen here and here. These are pictures of the property. And I walk in and automatically, just with my sensitivities, I am like, there is something up there that is funky and I don't like it and I don't want to go near it. I feel like I am being stared at and it is highly dark, highly uncomfortable. And so my two friends in the kitchen are like, "Hey Meg, how's it going? We're glad you're here." I'm like, "Yeah, how are you guys doing?" They're like, "We're great." And I'm like, "Yeah. Other than the thing that's up those stairs that's been staring at you the whole time." And they were like, "Oh my God, we were waiting for you to get here because we just had such a weird feeling and we're freaked out and we wanted to know what you thought," because they know I've got like sensitivities or whatever. I walked up the stairs and I got to about this spot right here and I stopped because I literally felt like an energetic wall, like, do not go any further. My friend said, "That's really weird. That's literally as far as we went to before you got here." And we were, they were just checking out the house and they went up into that weird little loft attic area and they were like, "Nope, no further." This is the top of the stairs right here. And if you look way down in this loft area, there's a little door with a crawl space and it was shut when we got there. As people started arriving, we were having fun joking, and one of the women went up there and we were talking about how creepy it was, and she said, "Was the door open when you guys went up there?" The crawl space door had been opened and none of us had been up there. So that night we're just kind of settling into the house, settling into the weekend, trying to figure out what's on the agenda, trying to have a good time. But if you're sensitive, you can just tell from these pictures, the place just had a creepy vibe. Those two same friends are sleeping in this room, and I am sleeping down here, downstairs, alone on a pull-out couch. First thing we notice is the incredible amount of dead insects all over the floor and even in the sheets. That night, one of my friends had her electronics go crazy at 3 a.m. I felt such a heavy layer of darkness. The first night I tried to go to sleep downstairs here on that pull-out couch, I felt like things were staring at me, circling me. I was this close to getting up and leaving in the middle of the night with a 2-hour drive home, rolling in at 5 a.m. with my husband, like, "What are you doing?" But I got this very clear message: you need to stay and you need to help hold up some kind of energetic barrier. I had a dream when I eventually fell asleep that the entire property was surrounded by fire and the fire couldn't penetrate this weird line that we were all trying to hold. So I was like, fine, okay, I guess I will stay in this freaky ass house. The next morning, we're all hanging out on the balcony and talking, having breakfast, having coffee, and people start to share their experiences. People were touched. People staying in the upstairs bedroom in the bunk beds had water dripped onto their faces, coming out of nowhere. And there were no leaks in the ceiling. It wasn't raining that weekend. Later that day, when most of the crew was playing yard games, like down here in the grass, one of the women was hanging out over here, and there was a deck of cards that literally got blown, and the cards were like flung into her face. I have no idea how that happened. At this point, I am getting so drained physically and feeling so sick, I need to go lie down. I'm alone in the house again, but I'm watching everybody from outside these windows where I'm at. Gosh, I can't point. And at this point, I'm just praying. Like, I'm here for a reason. These are people that I really care about and love, and I do not want to leave them here because I feel like I can be more helpful trying to hold off whatever this thing is. I did eventually run out to the corner store to test and make sure that the physical symptoms I was experiencing were really tied to the house and not just something going on with me. And as soon as I left the house, I felt so much better, but I had to come back. People were having personality changes while at the house. Like, they would start to withdraw, go take a shower, try and like snap out of it because they just felt something come over them. What I was picking up on primarily that kind of like lived in that upstairs loft area was something that was not nor had ever been human. This sounds really crazy because I've had run-ins with some really, really dark, start with a D word kind of entities. This wasn't even that. It almost felt like not from here, if you catch my drift. But it was, what I saw in my mind's eye was almost like a spidery looking thing. And it's interesting because another woman who was there told me that they saw that a spidery looking image of this big nasty thing like crawl from up in this main area down the stairs into the loft area where we were sleeping. And what's odd is that the safe places in the house would change depending on the time of day. It's like the rooms would just start to feel off. Another person said they were almost picking up on the presence of a man, like an older man. I wasn't picking up on a person, dead or alive, definitely a thing. The second night, one of my friends and I were just so uncomfortable about the idea of going to sleep that we just stayed up kind of deliriously talking to each other until, God, it must have been close to 4 a.m. just to not be asleep and unconscious in that environment. What's so weird and actually kind of miraculous if you think about it is that the bride was not affected. She was the only one out of all of us who had no idea what was going on because she was in her soon to be wed splendor. And also this particular person has an incredible amount of spiritual protection around her. So we were all really grateful for that. And we'd kind of like whisper about what happened to you last night and this happened to me in the bathroom earlier. And we were all just kind of keeping it out of the realm of awareness of the bride, fortunately. By the last morning, I'll never forget, one of my friends had set up a beautiful create your own crepe kind of buffet line. And we were all sitting down around at breakfast, trying to eat and just feeling so uncomfortable, ready to get the heck out of there. Someone said, "So you picking up on anything, Megan?" And it's interesting because at that moment, I felt just this overwhelming cloud, almost like darkness from every angle just starting to swoop in. And I said, I think it's time to go. The way everybody collectively pushed back from this table and popped up and got up and grabbed their stuff and started hauling ass out of there, it was like a scene in a movie. Other guests had weird experiences. I checked the book, paused to read. If anybody knows who this was, I would love to talk to you about your experience. This one's a little weird. I think some dude had a freaky experience and then leaned into the weirdness and hopefully just exaggerated because they didn't know what to make of it. We all stood outside of that house and we held hands in a circle and I kind of led everybody through a grounding and protective and clearing exercise because it was so vile. The husband-to-be was actually having his stag party down the road and they came over because they heard whispers and rumors about what was happening to us that weekend and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna run in and we're gonna take care of it." When they saw the look on our faces and they heard me say absolutely nobody's going into that house, they decided not to go in. I got in my car and was completely silent and white-knuckled my grip on the steering wheel until the tree line broke about an hour later and I was getting closer to home. I burst into tears and started sobbing because up until that point, I had never faced anything that dark or malevolent in my life. A few of us called each other after to process what had happened. It was wild.
That sounds completely unbelievable, but is
This is a story I swear I would never tell or talk about again, but my mom really wants me to tell it, so here we go. When I was in 5th grade, a new girl came to our school, and I didn't know her at all, but my mom and dad knew her mom and dad. They wanted me to like hang out with her. Well, she was in 6th grade. She was a year older than me, and she had 2 younger sisters, and she was there like 2 weeks or something like that, and they set up like a slumber party sleepover thing or whatever. I get over to her house, but first let me add, okay, her house was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was a log cabin that her dad had built, and it was like this 2-story lofty type cabin thing, and her parents were upstairs, but her dad had made like in the girls' room like built-in bunk beds in the wall, so they were like 3 high, right? And the little sister was going to sleep in the floor, and I was going to sleep in the middle, right? So you had to like climb the ladder on the outside of the beds and then like climb into the bed, which I thought was cool, you know, I was fine with it. But immediately when I got to the house that day, it was like heavy, and it kind of felt like something was like the air was thick or something. So she kept acting weird the whole time that I was there, and she would like look to the left and right and back and forth, and I'm like, what are you looking at? And she's like, oh, nothing. And then the little sister goes, she sees this woman. Ghosts weren't like new to me, but I knew this didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like something else, right? I would see like this dark shadow like show up and then like go away, and then around the corner I saw like these fingers come around the edge and then go like this, like around the door frame, but they weren't like regular fingers. They were like these really elongated black, like, and the nails weren't pointy. They were longer, but they looked like they had been like digging in something. They were like a brown dirt. This was like scary, whatever it was, right? So I'm already like planning my escape. Like I'm already like, okay, I'm gonna wait till bedtime, and I'm gonna call my mom, and I'm gonna say I'm sick or something, so she has to come and get me. We were out there, like I said, in the middle of nowhere, and then her dad was like, oh man, the phones are messed up again, and he comes in for like dinner, and I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean the phones are messed up? So this was like 91, 92, I guess, something like that. And he's like, yeah, they get down sometimes. And I'm like, well, what if I need to go home? And he said, well, you know, I'll take you home. You know, it's fine. It's fine if you need to go home. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm stuck out here, right? Like I'm not going to be like, hey, I need you to take me home, because my dad would have like ripped me a new one. Like, y'all know that he was mean, and he would have been so mad if I would have made this guy bring me home for nothing, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to stay here. Well, that night we go to get into bed, and she has jeans on. And I'm like, why are you sleeping in jeans? And she said, because I can't feel her scratch my legs in jeans. I'm like, feel who? What do you mean? Who? That little sister goes, the woman, the girl that she sees scratches her legs at night. And I'm like, oh my God. You know, like, oh my God, what do you mean? Well, is she going to try to scratch my legs? And she said, no, because you're in the middle bunk, she only gets mine. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, right? You've got to be kidding me. Well, we play games, we do whatever, and the whole time I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to see this woman. I've already like seen her hands, like, what am I going to do? And climb up, we go to get in bed. I'm not tired at all, like not at all. And all I can think about is this woman, right? Like, why is my friend in jeans to keep from feeling her hands? Like, what is going to happen? And under the bottom bed, there was like a nook thing, you know, for like storage or whatever. So something could get under that. And I'm like, oh, you know, so I climb up this ladder thing. I'm getting like sweaty just talking. I'm getting like red just talking about it. That was horrible. I climb up the ladder. I get in the middle bunk. So I'm trapped. It felt like I was in a coffin or something, you know, because the bed was above me and there was a bed below me. So I'm in this box in the wall, and I'm like, I can't. I was having like a panic attack. I'm like, oh my God, I can't sleep in here. They had it total darkness, no noise, no anything but fear, right? The only thing I could hear was like my heart slamming in my chest, and like my ears were like, whoa, 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 you know, I'm like, oh my God. Then I hear like the bottom bunk, like creak, you know, what's happening down there. And instead of just like not looking, like curiosity, you know, got the best of me. So I lean over, y'all, and this thing is like leaned over her. It's not in the bed with her, but it's like if it was kneeling beside her, and it's just going like dragging down her jeans. It sounded like that, you know, like dragging down jeans. So I'm looking down at this thing, hearing this, and then I look at my friend, and my friend's just like that. She goes, shh. So I freeze, right? So this goes on for a long time. It was me still peeking over the side, like looking, and you hear like, and then she just stops and then like retreats and sucks back under that bottom bunk. Turns out they had a Ouija board in that nook underneath the bed that she had made, a homemade Ouija board underneath the bed. Horrible. Horrible. I have never been so scared in my life. Let's just say I made it through the night. First thing in the morning, I was like, I'm ready to go. Because my mom wasn't supposed to come get me till like noon. This was like 9 o'clock. And he's like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I don't feel too good. Can you just take me home? I didn't care at that point what my dad said or did. I wanted to get the hell out of that log cabin in the woods. So he takes me home. I tell my mom. And she's like, well, you don't have to go back again. I'm like, no, I'm never going back.
A ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, I have video footage of this. I will share it at the end. Nobody thinks it's real. Like, it seems like it's doctored footage, but it's not. I swear on my life. Basically, both my sister and my old roommate used to work at this, like, music school daycare center for kids in the Upper East Side. The music classes would happen upstairs, but downstairs in the basement, there was this, like, daycare situation, and you had to work down there. And they both hated being down there. And I'd been down there a few times too. It is really scary. Like, you know when you just get a feeling about a place? Like, that is the basement. It was horrible. They would both, like, hear voices when their co-teacher hadn't showed up yet. Or, like, the cleaner would go downstairs and all the toys would be arranged in, like, a circle. And she'd be, like, in tears being like, are you guys playing a prank on me? I seriously, like, I don't feel safe here. The kids would all say really creepy shit. Like, they'd say, like, there's a really, like, mean guy in, like, the tunnel, like, a little play tunnel thing. Or, like, there's, like, someone mean over in, like, the dark corner of the basement. So when COVID hit, obviously no one was going into the daycare. It essentially shut down. But the owners installed cameras just in case, like, anything happened while they weren't there. And it picked up the most insane shit ever. It's a minute and a half long, so here you go.
I lied. Because this story that I'm about to tell you is the scariest story I've ever heard. If you're new here, hi. I just talk about some pretty scary stuff, and recently I opened an email where anyone who finds this page would be able to submit their ghost stories. And let me tell you, not only have I been getting an abundance of stories that I have loved reading that are from every corner of the earth, these are actually scary. What I mean by actually scary is exactly that. They actually freak me out. On my last video, I said this was the scariest story that I've ever heard. This one. So I just heard scratching, and as you can see, it's still day out, and that's the only time I really film these videos is during the day because I'm a scaredy cat. So I don't know what that's about because I thought it was my boyfriend pranking me. So I looked outside and there's no one there. Only when I did the intro for this person. So I'm going to redo it, and if it happens again, I hope it's on video. So anyways, this story comes from Dakota, who opens the email like this. This is the story about a who disguised itself as a little girl and haunted me for 2 years. Dakota then gives us some background context and says that she's a medium. She has seen, felt, heard, and touched spirits since she was around 5 years old. Which in retrospect is really scary when you think about it. But she says it all started when she was staying at her mom's house 2 hours away. She had a friend who lived right in front of the woods, and they decided to play hide and go seek. So Dakota finds a great hiding spot in between a shed and a chain link fence. And she says she was hiding looks over to her right, and on the other side of the fence is a little girl staring at her. And as soon as her and this little girl made eye contact, the little girl reached through the chain link fence and grabbed her wrist. Dakota yanks her hand back and looks back at this little girl, and she is not there anymore. It is also to be noted that this was around fall time, so there were leaves on the ground and branches and twigs and etc. And she didn't hear anyone walk away or run. So Dakota runs out, tries to tell her friend what had happened, and her friend is just not having it because she's scared. Fast forward 2 months, and she's back at her dad's house and having a sleepover with an old friend. As Dakota and her friend are talking to each other on her bed, she looks over at the doorway, and the little girl is standing right in the doorway. She didn't really think anything about it because at the time, all the neighbor kids were allowed to just kind of walk in her house. And I know families like that, so I understand. But she did a double take, and the little girl was gone the next time she looked. She asked her friend, "Did you see someone?" And her friend said, "No, I didn't see anyone." And Dakota said, "Little did I know this was the beginning of a 2-year ordeal." Dakota says every day since then, she sees this little girl in her house. And this little girl did not talk. She just stared at Dakota a lot of the time. And sometimes she would only show half of her face from around the corner. And I'm going to quote this. "But her favorite thing to do was watch me sleep." Dakota includes in her email that she likes sleeping in complete darkness. And the only thing that is radiating light in her room is her alarm clock that is blue. And she says every single night she would wake up and see this little girl standing in the doorway, watching her sleep. Dakota says that the most active this little girl was when she was home alone, cleaning her room. And Dakota, while cleaning her room, looks over into the living room, and just for some context, she lives in a trailer, so it's completely open concept, so you can look through rooms. She looks into the living room and sees a little girl standing there watching her. As soon as they make eye contact, the little girl runs into the kitchen. So Dakota follows her. And once she goes into the kitchen, the little girl standing in front of the fridge. The moment they make eye contact, the little girl runs into her dad's room. So she goes into her dad's room. Nobody's there. She's looking around. Nothing. Hears a loud bang coming from the laundry room. Goes into the laundry room. Sees the little girl standing in front of the washer and dryer. Then she runs back into the kitchen, and Dakota didn't see her the rest of the day. And Dakota says that it was really common for this little girl to not speak ever, but she would want Dakota's attention, so she would run around and kick things and knock things off counters and slam cabinets, etc. But fast forward 2 years, and Dakota's obviously used to it by now, but she hasn't seen this little girl in 4 months. Until one day, she saw her in her dream, and it was Dakota's first lucid dream. Dakota says that she goes to sleep, wakes up, and everything in her dream feels so real. She turns over at the clock, and it reads 3:16. When Dakota turns her head back around, there the little girl is. And she looks normal little girl that she's seen for the past 2 years at this point. And all of a sudden, this little girl starts to look really mangled and disgusting. She starts developing this smile and these teeth and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls back in her bed and wakes up. Looks over at the clock, 3:16. Dakota gets up, goes to the bathroom, and as she's standing up from using the bathroom, the little girl standing in the doorway. She looked like the same little girl that she's seen the past 2 years, until again, she looked really mangled and disgusting and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls backwards screaming. And they had this animal cage in their bathtub at the time that they were cleaning, falls back on that, and she could feel the cage under her. But nonetheless, she wakes up again. And it is again 3:16 a.m. But at this point, Dakota is too scared to move and too scared to do anything, so she just sits there until the sun comes up, where she feels safe. Dakota then, that morning, started to feel this burning sensation on her back, goes and looks in the mirror, and there's a huge gash on her back from where she fell onto something. her then best friend comes over later that day and also has spiritual connections, and tells her about this dream that she had where she was watching in third person and verbatim describes the dream that Dakota had twice. And at this point in time, Dakota did not tell her what was going on. Dakota then ends her email by telling us that if you see a clock or a phone in your dream, it means you're not really dreaming. And as corny as it sounds, she really and truly believes that this little girl was disguised as a trying to get her when she was in her most vulnerable state, sleeping. But that experience was 5 years ago, and she hasn't seen that little girl since. And this is all I'm going to say. I don't know how people deal with that stuff for years. I dealt with it for a month, and no. That story was really long. However, I think it was the best story I've read so far. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for my ghost stories.
I was a 911 operator for a little over 5 years. What was my scariest call? So I have a lot of them, but one of the ones I think about on a consistent basis is it's a warm summer evening and this lady calls in. It's like 10 or 11 o'clock at night and somebody has broken into her house. She lives alone, and so she knows there's like nobody else supposed to be there. She has no animals, but she can hear them walking around downstairs. So as a 911 operator, at least in the agency that I worked for, you can't like tell somebody where to go. Like, oh, go hide here or go here or go outside, because you don't know the layout of the house. Like, you don't know if it's safe. You don't want to put somebody in unnecessary danger. So I told her to go where she felt the most safe. And so she was like crouched down behind clothes in her closet, and she had called in from a landline. So as I'm getting like officers dispatched out to her, somebody picks up the other phone from downstairs and we both just go silent. Like, I put myself on mute because I have a lot of people walking around me. It's loud, and the intruder started breathing like the most creepy, like it was like and it literally made my skin crawl. Luckily, we were able to get officers out there pretty quickly, and they were able to apprehend the intruder. But when I tell you, like, I still think about that man's breathing, it keeps me up sometimes. Like, I'll wake up and like I can hear it, and yeah, it was awful. But that's one of those calls that kind of sticks with me. But I have a ton of them.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
Let me start off by saying I don't talk about this often because when I do, I sound crazy. A few years ago, I was gifted two purses by my ex-boyfriend's dad's friend. I accepted the purses, and I noticed that I was having these reoccurring nightmares with this lady in each nightmare. So one night, I fell asleep. My ex-boyfriend was sitting at the computer. He's gaming and whatnot. This lady pops up in my dream, but this dream is a little bit different because she was jumping in everybody that I loved's body and trying to get them to themselves in a frozen lake. So I was pulling them away, and she didn't like that very much. And then she refocuses on me, and she's running after me, and I'm running, but it's, you know how in dreams, like, you can't run very fast, like it's always in slow-mo or you punch slow. Well, in this dream I was running fast, and each time that I was looking back at her, she was gaining on me, and I got a glimpse of pretty much all of her features, like what she was wearing, what her hair looked like. It was black, it curled into her neck, and she just looked very mad. So eventually this lady, she gets me. She was wearing like a blue, long, almost Victorian type dress. She had black straight hair that curled into her neck. And she looked very mad. And so she eventually gets me, and I was woken up by my ex-boyfriend, who said that I sat straight up in bed and started hyperventilating with my eyes rolled in the back of my head. I woke up absolutely terrified. I had no idea what was going on. He had no idea what was going on. He thought I was having a seizure of some sort, and I was petrified to go to sleep. I called my grandma and I explained to her what was going on. I told her I'm tired of this, like it's causing me to lose sleep. I don't want to fall asleep. I don't want to see this lady anymore. I don't understand who she is or why this is happening, but I feel like I'm being haunted. So then, fast forward to a few days later, I see Joe again. I need to make a part 2.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I just came back from a walk, so I look horrible. I'm so sorry. But I'm from a suburb in Illinois, and my parents bought this house a couple months before I was born. And my sister, she's 3 at the time, they put her in one of the rooms. And a couple weeks into living there, she runs out of the room. She's screaming, "There's a lady in my closet." And my parents are like, you're dreaming, you know, it's in your head, you know, you're 3. And she said, "No, there's a lady in my closet." So they go and check, and there's nobody in the closet. But my sister refused to go into that room after that. So guess who got the bedroom? I did. So I'm now in that room, and you know, I don't really remember my childhood until like I was like maybe like 6. That's when I started getting memories. But one night, parents are sleeping, and I hear like crashing coming from the laundry room downstairs. It was like one of those like bi-level homes, and my sister hears it. So we both come out of our rooms. Our parents are dead asleep, and we had those stackable, colorful containers that like pull out that were on like the plastic trays. Those were being yanked out and like thrown into the laundry room floor. And my sister and I were about to go downstairs to go check it out, and we had one of those big box TVs that had like the speaker, like one of those big ones. And this is the 90s. And we go down, and we see the TV in the corner, and there's something hovering over the TV, and we're hearing crashing as this is all going on. So we were like, nope. We booked it, and I went to my sister's room because she was scared of my room, and I went to her room, and we just, you know, took cover together. We were terrified. So the years go on, and there's still some like stuff going around, and my dad's in like denial. He doesn't believe in any of this stuff. And my mom now that we're out of the house, she's like, "Oh yeah, definitely there's something there." But at the time, she's like, you girls are just watching like too much TV. And I'm like, "Ma, I'm watching SpongeBob." You know, so SpongeBob's not scary except for that maybe one episode with the hash and slasher. Besides the point, as the years go on and I'm in this scary room, I woke up one night screaming because there was this man in the corner of my room with just head, shoulders, and straight down. And I'm screaming, and my parents come in. They're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what?" My sister follows in, and she sees it, and she starts screaming. She said, "There's a man in the room." And I'm like, "There's a man in the room." My parents are like, "There's nothing here." So I refused to sleep in that room for a little bit. Because there was every night there was shoulders, head, shoulders, straight down. That's it. Darker than the dark. And that's when I started sleeping with a nightlight. And I slept with a nightlight until like 3 years ago because this shit scared me so bad. So now it's junior high, and I'm starting to make friends. And there's this one girl that I invite over for a sleepover. And I haven't told anybody anything that's been going on in the house because I don't want people to think I'm crazy. So I invite her over, and I'm like, "You know what? You could change in my room. I'll change into my pajamas in the bathroom, and then we'll, you know, come back and do sleepover stuff." And not even 2 seconds of me being in the bathroom, she's banging on the door. And I open the door. She has no pants on. She's crying and shaking. She said, "There's a man in your room, and I want to go home." And so now I'm looking at her like, "Oh my God, you're seeing it too." So my mom comes up because she hears my friend freaking out, and she asks what's going on. She's like, "There's a man in her room. I want to go home." And my mom's like, "Well, it's 11:30 at night. We can't really bring you home right now. Let's just sleep downstairs." So I'm like, okay, now I know I'm not crazy. Me and my sister are not crazy if we're all seeing the same thing. So things just start getting weirder throughout the house. My dad even said that he's felt like there was somebody sitting on the edge of the couch with him. Your hair just sticks up in this house. You hear voices, you hear whispering, things are constantly getting knocked off of shelves in the middle of the night. Our fridge would open and close. Just so many weird occurrences, to the point where my mom, we had I'm not Catholic, so is it a deacon? We had somebody from a Catholic church that worked at the Catholic church, our neighbor. He came over and he blessed the house because it was getting that bad. And that didn't work. We think it made it worse. And also, when this is all going on, the show Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi is getting really popular. So my sister's friend ends up buying, Ghost Hunters had like this like ghost hunting kit. So she bought one just for her, and she's like, we know your house has some weird shit going on. Let's have like an investigation. And my dad traveled a lot when I was younger. So there was no men in the house. It was just my mom, me, my sister's friend, and my sister. And she brings over all the equipment, and we're like getting all hyped up. We're like, we're gonna catch something. We're gonna catch something. And my mom, I remember she's standing on the stairs. It's like one of those bi-level houses, so she's standing on the stairs, and us being Midwesterns, we had a plastic bag full of plastic bags hanging on the banister. And I remember she's like, you girls better not be loud. I don't want to hear you guys screaming because you're freaking yourselves out. Whatever you do, just be chill about it. And after she stopped saying that, the bag on the banister starts violently swinging. My mom looks at it and goes, I'm going to bed. So then she goes up and we start our investigation. My room always had the most activity, of course. So we set up the EVP recorder in there, and there was like that thermal temperature. My room was like 35 degrees colder than the rest of the house. And so we set it up and we went downstairs and we just hung out downstairs. And we let that thing go for, I think it was like 7 hours of recording. So then the next day, my sister's friend went home and she's listening through the entire tape. And later on that night, she's like, you got to hear this. So she comes over and she plays the recording. And on the recording, there is a man. It's like a weird, like, I can't even recreate it, but it's like this weird, like, grumbling, like, growling almost. And on the recording, it said, I did it. I killed her. So we're like, okay, what the fuck? So we're going crazy, and we start talking more about it to our family. And my uncle goes, oh, well, your neighborhood used to be called West Haven, and this girl I actually knew was murdered there. It's a very horrific story, so I won't get into it. So we're like, there's no way. So we went to the library and we looked up the archives. Sure enough, there was a girl that was unalived on our property. So we start piecing together. We don't even know if this is like legit or not, but we're thinking that the lady in the closet was the teenager that unfortunately lost her life. And to my sister being 3 years old, that's a lady, but it's a teenager. But we think the woman in the closet, it was her. And we think the guy that we've been seeing in the corner was the killer. So that's just our little own speculation of that. But after living with the evidence and the information that we gathered, we were freaked out, but we just kind of made peace with it. We'd be downstairs middle of the summer, late at night, and we would hear like somebody coming down the stairs. We thought it was our dad because we woke him up, and no one ever came down. My grandmother ended up being in hospice at our house, and that's when the activity really upticked. I remember standing in my room looking at a necklace that my grandma just gave me, and I saw from here down run to my parents' bedroom, but no one was upstairs. So we sold the house about 11 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, and we moved to Michigan. And I still go home from time to time, and I go drive past our old house because we were there for 18 years. You know, we're still very much connected to it. And one of the last times I drove past it, I saw somebody peeking out the window like that. So yeah, that's my story. That was my entire childhood. And now I deal with some paranormal stuff, but not as much as I did back in Illinois. So there's that.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I live in Oregon, and a friend of mine was having her bachelorette party at a cabin in the woods at the base of a very well-known mountain. I was looking forward to going. A lot of people I care about were going to be on that trip, and I thought it sounded like a really fun weekend just to get away and be in nature. And the first thing that happened when I left my house and I was just on the outskirts of town, I got such a strong feeling to turn around and grab some cleansing tools like sage, Palo Santo, whatever I had on hand. And it was so strong, I turned the car around, went home. My husband's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I just had to use the bathroom and I don't want to use the gas station." Totally fed him a line because I didn't want him to get worried. It was a really pleasant drive up there, a couple of hours. You're at least in the forest for, I'd say, 45 to 50 minutes before you find this house. This house. As soon as I pull up into the garage, I immediately just have this overwhelmingly heavy feeling that I really can't explain. 2 other people had arrived. They were there taking care of a lot of the organizational details. And I walked in, and my 2 friends are standing in the kitchen here and here. These are pictures of the property. And I walk in, and automatically, just with my sensitivities, I am like, there is something up there that is funky and I don't like it and I don't want to go near it. I feel like I am being stared at and it is highly dark, highly uncomfortable. And so my 2 friends in the kitchen are like, "Hey Meg, how's it going? We're glad you're here." I'm like, "Yeah, how are you guys doing?" They're like, "We're great." And I'm like, "Yeah. Other than the thing that's up those stairs that's been staring at you the whole time." And they were like, "Oh my God, we were waiting for you to get here because we just had such a weird feeling and we're freaked out and we wanted to know what you thought," because they know I've got like sensitivities or whatever. I walked up the stairs and I got to about this spot right here and I stopped because I literally felt like an energetic wall, like, do not go any further. My friend said, "That's really weird. That's literally as far as we went to before you got here." And we were, they were just checking out the house and they went up into that weird little loft attic area and they were like, "Nope, no further." This is the top of the stairs right here. And if you look way down in this loft area, there's a little door with a crawl space and it was shut when we got there. As people started arriving, we were having fun joking, and one of the women went up there and we were talking about how creepy it was, and she said, "Was the door open when you guys went up there?" The crawl space door had been opened and none of us had been up there. So that night we're just kind of settling into the house, settling into the weekend, trying to figure out what's on the agenda, trying to have a good time. But if you're sensitive, you can just tell from these pictures. The place just had a creepy vibe. Those 2 same friends are sleeping in this room, and I am sleeping down here, downstairs, alone on a pull-out couch. First thing we notice is the incredible amount of dead insects all over the floor and even in the sheets. That night, one of my friends had her electronics go crazy at 3 a.m. I felt such a heavy layer of darkness. The first night I tried to go to sleep downstairs here on that pull-out couch, I felt like things were staring at me, circling me. I was this close to getting up and leaving in the middle of the night with a 2-hour drive home, rolling in at 5 a.m. with my husband, like, "What are you doing?" But I got this very clear message: you need to stay and you need to help hold up some kind of energetic barrier. I had a dream when I eventually fell asleep that the entire property was surrounded by fire, and the fire couldn't penetrate this weird line that we were all trying to hold. So I was like, fine, okay, I guess I will stay in this freaky ass house. The next morning, we're all hanging out on the balcony and talking, having breakfast, having coffee, and people start to share their experiences. People were touched. People staying in the upstairs bedroom in the bunk beds had water dripped onto their faces, coming out of nowhere, and there were no leaks in the ceiling. It wasn't raining that weekend. Later that day, when most of the crew was playing yard games, like down here in the grass, one of the women was hanging out over here, and there was a deck of cards that literally got blown, and the cards were like flung into her face. I have no idea how that happened. At this point, I am getting so drained physically and feeling so sick, I need to go lie down. I'm alone in the house again, but I'm watching everybody from outside these windows where I'm at. Gosh, I can't point. And at this point, I'm just praying. Like, I'm here for a reason. These are people that I really care about and love, and I do not want to leave them here because I feel like I can be more helpful trying to hold off whatever this thing is. I did eventually run out to the corner store to test and make sure that the physical symptoms I was experiencing were really tied to the house and not just something going on with me. And as soon as I left the house, I felt so much better, but I had to come back. People were having personality changes while at the house. Like, they would start to withdraw, go take a shower, try and like snap out of it because they just felt something come over them. What I was picking up on primarily that kind of like lived in that upstairs loft area was something that was not nor had ever been human. This sounds really crazy because I've had run-ins with some really, really dark, start with a D word kind of entities. This wasn't even that. It almost felt like not from here, if you catch my drift. But it was, what I saw in my mind's eye was almost like a spidery looking thing. And it's interesting because another woman who was there told me that they saw a spidery looking image of this big nasty thing like crawl from up in this main area down the stairs into the loft area where we were sleeping. And what's odd is that the safe places in the house would change depending on the time of day. It's like the rooms would just start to feel off. Another person said they were almost picking up on the presence of a man, like an older man. I wasn't picking up on a person, dead or alive, definitely a thing. The second night, one of my friends and I were just so uncomfortable about the idea of going to sleep that we just stayed up kind of deliriously talking to each other until, God, it must have been close to 4 a.m. just to not be asleep and unconscious in that environment. What's so weird and actually kind of miraculous if you think about it is that the bride was not affected. She was the only one out of all of us who had no idea what was going on because she was in her soon-to-be wed splendor. And also, this particular person has an incredible amount of spiritual protection around her. So we were all really grateful for that, and we'd kind of like whisper about what happened to you last night and this happened to me in the bathroom earlier, and we were all just kind of keeping it out of the realm of awareness of the bride, fortunately. By the last morning, I'll never forget, one of my friends had set up a beautiful create-your-own crepe kind of buffet line, and we were all sitting down around at breakfast, trying to eat, and just feeling so uncomfortable, ready to get the heck out of there. Someone said, "So, you picking up on anything, Megan?" And it's interesting because at that moment, I felt just this overwhelming cloud, almost like darkness from every angle just starting to swoop in, and I said, I think it's time to go. The way everybody collectively pushed back from this table and popped up and got up and grabbed their stuff and started hauling ass out of there, it was like a scene in a movie. Other guests had weird experiences. I checked the book, paused to read. If anybody knows who this was, I would love to talk to you about your experience. This one's a little weird. I think some dude had a freaky experience and then leaned into the weirdness and hopefully just exaggerated because they didn't know what to make of it. We all stood outside of that house and we held hands in a circle, and I kind of led everybody through a grounding and protective and clearing exercise because it was so vile. The husband-to-be was actually having his stag party down the road, and they came over because they heard whispers and rumors about what was happening to us that weekend, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna run in and we're gonna take care of it." When they saw the look on our faces and they heard me say absolutely nobody's going into that house, they decided not to go in. I got in my car and was completely silent and white-knuckled my grip on the steering wheel until the tree line broke about an hour later and I was getting closer to home. I burst into tears and started sobbing because up until that point, I had never faced anything that dark or malevolent in my life. A few of us called each other after to process what had happened. It was wild.